Hi and welcome to In Deep Crit. My name's Luke Hindmarsh and I am joined by my usual co-host.
Hi, I'm Damien Humphreys.
We have the absolute pleasure to also be joined by multi-genre, international best-selling, I think we can call him, author C T Phipps. That's Charles Phipps. I'm going to be calling you Charles. I hope that's all right. Charles, hello. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much there. And yes, that is technically true. I am internationally best-selling by the loosest possible definition.
Well,
Thank you
yes.
for joining us, Charles.
Yeah,
Thank you for coming on. Yeah,
it's
really
brilliant.
appreciate it.
So if you're watching this, hopefully you actually know who Charles is. But if you don't, we're introducing you to someone who has written across. So let's see, you've got like supervillains, so that's comic book superhero type novels. That's the rules of supervillainy. You've got fantasy, that's Wraith Knight. You've got space opera in a sort of semi quite dark and gritty space opera. That's like the Lucifer Star setting. And these are all series. And more.
Cowboy Eldritch Horror
with Cthulhu Armageddon, which is now moving into what perhaps could be called sort of like Cthulhu noir. And we're going to cover a few of these topics with you, I hope. But you've written in so many different genres and subgenres. Is there a particular series that you are still, that is your sort of number one, that's the closest to your heart, or are you sort of equally in love with all your book children, as it were?
Well, I could say that I love all my children equally, but I'd be lying. Basically, I think I have two different kind of moods when I get into writing there. The one is my wacky mood, which is the rules of supervillainy, Space Academy, and most of my urban fantasy books, like I Was a Teenage Weredeer and Straight Outta Fankton, they're basically very strongly influenced by the Dresden Files, Christopher Moore, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of storytelling, the MCU. There's serious-ish stories, but the characters are such wise asses, it's just a laugh a minute there, and they're all aware they're in the kind of story they're in. So when I do Gary Karkovsky, aka Merciless, the supervillain without mercy, it's with the perspective that he is deeply familiar with comic book tropes and thinks he's in one, and when he's not, it's hilarious, and when he is, it's inexplicable to everyone who doesn't realize that he's basically the gangster quoting Michael Corleone.
It's great, yeah.
Yes, and the serious mode is when I go with Wraith Knight, which is my dark fantasy, very inspired by 80s Dungeons and Dragons kind of storytelling there, but Raistlin and Lord Soth rather than the humorous, light, fluffy Kender. And Lucifer Star, which is sort of, what if the Empire had been the perspective of Star Wars, and the Death Star is blown up, and it's like, oh wow, I have to find a new job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say TIE Pilot finds himself becoming Han Solo. And third, there's Cthulhu Armageddon, which is very much Mad Max meets Cthulhu, and comes from the perspective of, it's an action series there, but it's an action series where the quote-unquote villains have already explicitly won, and the world is destroyed, and it's a matter of survival in the world afterward. And that's just a laugh riot.
That's quite a lot of horror within that one as well, I think. I mean, I've read a lot of your books.
Horror, which is not a contradiction in terms. We've all seen zombie movies, but it's something that is a very specific taste. Some Lovecraft fans love the boom boom explosions going along with the people as the world is dying, while others very much think that's going against the grain. I'm like, what if it's H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard? And I don't want to say Fallout, but why not Fallout?
I was interested in that. So I am relatively new to your books here, Charles. And I'm reading Cthulhu Armageddon at the moment. And I was going to ask that kind of, is there a tension with, because I'm also a massive Lovecraft fan, but I don't consider myself to be a precious Lovecraft fan. And there's been so much that's been influenced by Lovecraft, and I mean, he had his issues as a writer as well. Let's not beat about the bush.
Well, definitely.
So there's a lot of
every
backlash.
conversation with Lovecraft seems to open as like, hey, you know, he was really racist. And I'm like, yes, actually, I do. And you know, I love his stuff still. You know, even though I disagree with everything he says there. And you know, it's kind of funny. There's a famous story that I think every Lovecraft would-be fan should know about, was that Lovecraft did enter a really dark period in the early 1930s, where he's like, oh wow, this whole fashion and things look good there. And his best friend, who he never met in person, at least as far as I know, Robert E. Howard, aka Conan the Barbarian's author, and many other stories like Solomon Kane. Robert E. Howard explained in detail how utterly stupid it was for a nerdy, wayfish intellectual pulp writer, and the Nazis hated pulp writing too, would be to become enamored with fascism. And he said something akin to the effect of like, HP, I will come and beat the living shit out of you if don't get your head on straight. And Howard did there. He married a Jewish woman. He moved to New York. And while he didn't do great there, it did at least cause him to switch to being a New Deal Democrat. So he wasn't a traitor to the United States during World War II. And he was reevaluating a lot of things there. His views weren't perfect there, but he got rid of his anti-Semitism and his sex, and he became very pro-feminist, especially for the time.
Yeah.
And then he died.
So a process had been started with Lovecraft that maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be the one of those guys that says like, no, he totally got better. Let's be honest about this thing. He was pretty racist still by our standards at the time there, but I also think he became more or less normally racist for the time, rather than being really racist, especially even for the period.
Even for the period, yeah.
To some extent, so with your main character Booth within Cthulhu Armageddon, and then the Tower of Zal, and now with the Tree of Azathoth, which I'm reading at the moment, 3/4 through. Brilliant.
I feel like opening it up now after that rant, saying, "Oh, by the way, Booth, my main character, is black."
Yeah, exactly. Is exactly, and to some extent,
no, I am not faithful all that much to Lovecraft's writing in some respects.
No, the mythos, but not the man, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to go one more thing to interject before we
go please. Yeah.
There is what I was getting into is Lovecraft comes in two flavors, and I think people sometimes forget that. One flavor is cosmic horror H.P. Lovecraft, which is all about the existential relationship of man to the discovery he is unimportant in the grand scheme of things, doomed and utterly insignificant, and we should all be really sad about that. Which, it gets the attention because that's what the first-year philosophy students are really obsessed with.
True, yeah.
Isn't that deep?
Yeah. Whoa, man.
They try not to acknowledge the other part of Lovecraft, which is really what popularized it, which is the pulpy adventure Lovecraft, which is the Dunwich Horror, the case of Charles Dexter Ward, and Reanimator to a certain extent, and The Dream in the Witch House, which is where they do fight back. They don't necessarily win, but Lovecraft is writing stories for 14-year-old boys in his own time too. We're buying the dollar magazine.
Yes, sure, yeah.
I mean,
I love that. I love that Lovecraft. That is my jam there. Call of Cthulhu, the game, Dark Corners of the Earth, The Sinking City. There, yes. And also Brian Lumley joins me at this, and I actually got to bond with him online over our shared love of pulpy Lovecraft, as he's the author of a 1970 series called Titus Crow, which can best be described as clearly he was doing a lot of LSD and other drugs when he was writing.
I know him from, is it Necroscope? I think.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes, because that's doing classic horror Dracula and really scary vampires, but you have a guy who can absorb the powers of Bruce Lee just by walking over his grave.
Nice.
It seems to me sometimes so in terms of the cosmic horror element, you absolutely capture that, but that's not just within the Cthulhu Armageddon series. You've also got hints of that sort of grand scale humanity is small and under threat, and there are big things out there in the universe that could within some of your other series. So for example, I'm thinking Lucifer's Star and such.
Yes, Lucifer's Star is from the perspective of not so much the kind of Warhammer-ish kind of, the universe is dark, scary, and full of terrors, and you're just trying to do there. Yeah. I kind of view that from more for the perspective of A Song of Ice and Fire, is like what if you are dealing with this really dark universe which is corrupt and you're just trying to survive, and there's no real overthrowing the big bad government, so to speak. There, you just try and live through it there. And Cassius Mass, who is the protagonist of Lucifer's Star, is a character who is on an ongoing journey to realizing that oh my God, was I the baddie?
Yes. There's a couple of British comedians who do a sketch
about
Mitchell and Webb.
I get the joke. You obviously both get the joke.
There. Yeah. There's
Mitchell and Webb.
Mitchell and Webb, exactly, where it's like, we the and it's just like, well, you're wearing a uniform.
I'm not saying that the Nazis aren't exciting there, but we have skulls on our uniform here. We're wearing all black.
It's a bad.
I feel like we're projecting an image. Cassius was this amazing fighter pilot, and he's a feudal nobleman in space, which should have been his first big clue that they were not fighting for the cause of freedom and justice. Yes, the lightning count.
Yes.
Yes, and racking up all these kills there is like fighting the heroic day right up until it turns out everyone else in the galaxy fighting them wins, and they bomb his planet to ashes, and he's like, holy crap, that we really had this coming after I look over what we had been doing, and we really thought we were going to win. And after that, he's getting looked for as a war criminal and all these other things there, and he's trying to rebuild his life there. And just about he finally does get discovered, and the premise of that book is he assumes he's going to be shot or whatever, and they're like, no, we kind of need you actually, because there's a lot of other people who have a grandiose view of this, and if you could maybe talk to them and say stop blowing up shit, that'd be fine. And that's where the book kind of starts there, where he ends up working for the other side, as much because it's better than hauling cargo.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
I think that book was my introduction to you, and
oh yes, I appreciate all your interesting thoughts there, and I think you had an appreciation for it then there, and I really do love writing anti-heroes and perspectives of my characters can be very powerful and super skilled there, but they're always overwhelmed by the setting itself there. Going over to Wraith Knight from Lucifer's Star there, that's when that can basically be summarized as, okay, Sauron is dead. What if the Witch King lived and now suddenly got his free will back because the Ring of Power was controlling his mind this entire time? It's like, okay, now I'm back to being a king of man, and I'm still undead and a horror against God, Eru. And oh yes, all the forces of good are now falling apart because there's no common enemy to deal with them. And what do I do now? Do I destroy myself or try and find a way to do dark power as well? And hey, the orcs are free now and everyone hates them. It's like, well, and we were slaves. What do you want us to do?
Yeah. So with that, there's some themes of redemption arcs within the books like Lucifer's Star and Wraith Knight, but at the same time, there's also, I think within Wraith Knight, it seemed to me, and perhaps this is not right, but it seemed to me that there was a degree to which you were looking at how time had passed for Jacob Rivers, who's
Riverson.
Riverson, sorry.
Yeah, well, he's got that bastard Jon Snowish name there.
Yeah, he comes back to himself with all these powers, having been like a hero before he was corrupted and such. And then there's a degree to which I felt like looking at the side of good now, it's like they'd almost become, I wouldn't say corrupted, but there's a degree to which being the victors had altered how, I mean, this may be getting into the second book and such, but
I'll go ahead there.
Their attitude towards their defeated enemies became a sort of almost a tyrannical sort of approach, to which someone with his moral standards before he became a ring wraith, I know he's not a ring wraith, but would have stood up against, and there's the degree to which he sort of also looks back at his own particularly sort of blinkered, this is right and this is wrong.
Yes, Jacob. One of the things about Jacob is he obviously thinks he needs to make atonement for being what he's done while being mind controlled for like 200 years. Yeah. But there's also the consequence of the fact there that Jacob also has to come in terms with the fact he pretty much jumps right into the first cause he finds and goes all in because it's the first one he can do that may provide him some way out of thinking too hard about a situation. And slowly through the book series, we also get a good look at the old one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter kind of view there.
Yeah.
And how Jacob's own memories of his past as a great hero may also have been influenced by perspective. The whole thing that if I could summarize Wraith Knight 1 and 2, which is Wraith Lord, would be definitely when you think of yourself as the good guy, that can be even more dangerous than thinking you're casting away morality completely.
Yeah.
And Jacob has a history of going all in on any side that he views as the righteous one. And that has something that is a danger to every one of these so-called quote-unquote heroes. It's as we go with the example I said before there, if this was the Reconstruction period after the defeat of the Nazis there, you have the people that definitely want to go all in against them and so on. But, if you want to destroy all the orcs, maybe you should also take into the circumstances some of them had the gun back to their head.
Difficult to know exactly what the truth
and and maybe they are actually that bad there, but are you using your resources well, and are you not necessarily forcing in another conflict to emerge? Because if you don't help your enemies back up, quote to speak, they'll just remain so, and stamping them all out is a lot bigger issue than you may think.
Yeah, and perhaps that danger of anybody who thinks they're absolutely right, whatever side they're coming from. If they kind of only fools and tyrannical leaders believe they have all the answers. Right?
Oh yes. One of the definite things is the villains in Wraith Knight are definitely motivated by the view that they are absolutely in the right and righteous and doing the right thing, while the forces of quote-unquote darkness are people that were very often forced into the situation there. But that doesn't mean they're not guilty. And there just mean there isn't actual reasons for all this kind of thing there. I'm getting on the other perspective there, but I'm definitely not endorsing it either. It's not just like, oh, the orcs were the good guys all along.
Going after a more nuanced view rather than a sort of straight left side, right side.
I actually will leave it to the reader to decide who was in the right here. Influence just obviously as much at this point there. Joe Abercrombie does a great job of. I wrote an essay for college, oddly enough, that ended up in Grimdark magazine called "Is the First Law Trilogy the Anti-Lord of the Rings?" And I comment on the fact is that the book starts out very much doing a typical fantasy setup there, and then you find out just how utterly awful the protagonists are and how little they learn. The typical journey of like, yes, Bilbo goes out, learns a great lesson, comes back a better man there. It's like this one and I was about to use the example of Bilbo goes out there, traumatized, comes back, immediately never thinks about adventures again.
That's that's quite apt.
I just realized that was Frodo's ending. So
actually starts torturing some of his fellow hobbits. Yeah.
Oh yes, it's like yes, Bilbo brings back Saruman and says like, I totally just kick out these poor people, build a bypass to Isengard. Yeah.
Yeah, thinking about Abercrombie, it'd be a bit like Bilbo coming back and sort of, oh, well, I've lost a finger, but gained a passenger in my head, and now anyone insults me, I'll just be, wiping out Hobbiton. And so whilst we're on the topic of that sort of exploration of the nuances and such, politics. I've read quite a few of your books now, and across the series, and I think I probably have an idea. I'm not asking you to comment specifically on your politics, but I've got a fair.
I have to say this there. I would be so much better off in the British Isles during the '80s because I would just nicely fit into those really bad attitude punks of them.
you not?
Yes, I am very much in let's just say a light anarchist. So talking about all my politics, but I hate everybody.
No, but this is cool, and I think so. To me, it's not like you've got your character's mouthpiecing that viewpoint, or it's not like you're preachy with it, but it's an undercurrent to themes and plots and such. But to what? How do you hold that in check?
Mind making fun of my things there. If I ever have a preachy character, it would be Gary, the protagonist of the Rules of Supervillain. But here's the thing: Gary thinks he deliberately set out to be a supervillain.
Yeah.
Because he had this incredibly, and in the universe, incredibly wrong view that quote unquote supervillains are just misunderstood enemies of the establishment. When at one point he meets an actual motherfucking Nazi. So
Yeah.
for villains, so I was like, yeah, I need to reevaluate my philosophy regarding superheroes who punch him in the face.
Is there an extent to which so that was was that your first series, the supervillainy, Rules of Supervillainy?
Close enough there. It was written concurrently with Cthulhu Armageddon there. It was ironically enough, I was trying to get published with an indie horror publication called Permuted Press, which amusingly the politics of what I hate kind of come into play there, but in a very funny way. I wrote Cthulhu Armageddon because everyone loves Lovecraft. It was I love Lovecraft. We were going to get into the big pulpy adventure kind of thing there, and I figured it would be a good place to start, and they were very interested in that. But Iron Man had just come out there, and I was a big comic book geek too, so I wrote the Rules of Supervillainy simultaneously just to get all the funny jokes and pop culture references and so on out of my head there. And I finished the 2 books there, and Permuted Press got bought by a bunch of right-wing crazies who proceeded to stop publishing horror and published Oliver North's biographies instead.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I say biographies because the man won't stop talking about himself.
That's a hard right.
Yeah, they canceled my contract, which had been in production for 2 years, and I had to spend time getting my rights back. And I was not exactly it's not like that made me even more disinclined to dislike the far right, but
yeah,
that kind of just summarized my book position there.
Yeah. With supervillainy and Rules of Supervillainy in that series, obviously at the moment we're seeing some live action success for things like The Boys, which was Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson. I don't know whether you also encountered something called Martial Law, which was
yes.
You probably know.
Those
had a particular tone.
Enough about these kind of things there that I understood Jared was originally ironic.
Yeah.
And people kind of just forgot that.
Yeah.
Same with Warhammer.
Yes, indeed. It's funny how people lean into it too far, right?
Yeah.
Judge Dredd is not an instruction manual.
Yeah. But going on with the thing about Boys is there. Yeah, I enjoyed the comic there. But I actually think Amazon, which is kind of the man using the revolution to amuse himself there. Amazon did make one correction with Enos, which is the fact never go full Enos unless you're doing Hellblazer, because 20% of Enos is enough to shock and horrify and thrill most audiences. You don't need the full 100% Enos.
No, they did Preacher as well. Was that Amazon?
Yeah, they did Preacher. Yeah, But no, you can never get away with all of the stuff in The Boys there, and he's mostly attacking comic books itself rather than the satire of corporations and culture and the larger fascist undertones that was the show at least seems to understand are still there, but Enos gets a little bit too much into there.
You don't seem to be attacking. I mean, so with Supervillainy, it doesn't seem to me like you're attacking comic book superheroes. More as you were talking about, poking fun at the misunderstandings and making a sort of there's a comedic element to it and such. But it doesn't seem quite as it's not. I think Enos has a sort of harsh edge, and Mills and O'Neill with Martial Law were even more.
I mean, there's definitely a lot you can make fun of. There's deeper themes to the supervillainy, which is like, what does one do if you actually did have the power to change the world? Yeah. How would you use it there? Because usually superheroes, because of the nature of the medium, are defenders of the establishment, and the establishment sucks. But I'm not one of those guys who falls into that idiot idea that Batman is a fascist or something like that. No. Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of progressive and anti-establishment comic books too. There, I mean, just and big ones too. I mean, the X-Men are fundamentally a pro-progressive tolerance and anti-government thing there. But you just got to take them each as they go there. And with the Rules of Supervillainy there, Gary is an anarchist who should be a superhero, but he keeps wrapping himself up in the trappings of being a supervillain because he thinks it's cool, and he falls into the same traps of himself there, because once he gets his first fortune that he steals from a bunch of evil cultists, he's like, Yeah, I'm going to build this nice mansion of myself there. Still working for the revolution, though. Okay. My own jet. It will have a giant M on it. Flawed character.
A personal point. Those books, I listened to them on audio book, and they saw me through a sort of a dark time to do with my, with family illness and all this sort of thing. So I've got a lot of time for Merciless. TM.
Oh yes, nice book is a plan for this year. I've managed to get, that's my most successful series by far. There, it's kind of telling there. Cthulhu Armageddon has about 500 reviews, and that's very successful, especially for indie books. There,
yeah.
Rules of Supervillainy 4,900.
That's awesome.
That's the audiobook, yeah. So people definitely have a lot more higher tolerance for lighthearted comedy, even with a little bit of edge.
Sorry, I'm doing a lot of the questions, Damien. I know you've got quite a few.
Yeah.
You want to get around to Lovecraft, the Cthulhu Armageddon book you've actually read?
Yeah, I'm to be honest, I'm kind of just getting into it at the moment. But what I wanted to pick up on was you've mentioned gaming a couple of times now. You've kind of mentioned Warhammer and Cthulhu and other stuff.
Oh yes.
What came first for you, the gaming or the writing, or did they both come at the same time? Is there a massive gaming influence? Obviously, that's an influence on Vampire the Masquerade being republished, stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I'm going to tell you, to be perfectly honest there. Don't tell Paradox or Hasbro about my books. They will utterly come after me and take me the hell out. How I write is actually strongly influenced by gaming there, because I actually write as I storytell. I create as a dungeon master, quote unquote, the adventure for Gary. Merciless, the supervillain without mercy. There's like, I come up with this idea, the villain, what their plot is going to do, and then I imagine Gary as a character that I put into the story and describe how he would react to the events as they go, and play and adjust the story as to his action goes there. And that's pretty much how my books come out, which means they're very dialogue heavy and interactive and mostly first person, but it's worked well for me, at least in a couple of cases there. And going on with this point, Gary, obviously super heroes. I played a couple of tabletop RPGs there, but that's the most on a different side of geek kind of there. Cthulhu Armageddon, I would say that's very much video game Fallout influenced and post-apocalypse and kind of this one there. Wandering, it's the open world kind of book from my perspective, because it's not that John really can save the world. He can't, but he can certainly explore it and try and carve his own little piece of that. Wraith Knight is just straight so Dungeons and Dragons it hurts there. It's funny because it does get into some dark topics there, and he's way overpowered compared to your typical adventuring party there, being Lord Soth or Ring. But all my influences are very easy to read there, and that is my most classically kind of gaming emotion there. And I also have another series that I haven't touched on that I wrote a bunch of trilogies for there called The United States of Monsters. That's Straight Out of Hankton, I Was a Teenage Weird Year, the Red Room series, which has esotericism and a couple of other books, and also a book called Psycho Killers in Love. It's an entire shared universe of stories in that point. And that is, they would be able to sue me for ripping off the World of Darkness, if not for the fact it's all in the public now.
Right, yeah. yeah, who's going to sue you, yeah. And there's so there's a link between that United States of Monsters. Is there a bigger meta link between more of your work? Is there more connections than?
I wouldn't have thought I would have done that there. I was keeping them strictly separated there, right up until I had finished the fourth supervillainy saga book there, and I still wanted to write them because I had just mentioned it as 4 books and then done, and you can read the 4th book and probably was like, oh wow, this is a nice wrapping up point there. I was like, well, I need money and it's still pretty fun to write, so why not? And it's a superhero series, so of course there's another book. So I did that one, and I did a book called The Tournament of Supervillainy, and that became Crisis on Infinite Earths plus Mortal Kombat. And I just went crazy with the idea of, so I brought all of my characters from my other books to fight in basically Shang Tsung's tournament. Yeah, you had Jane Doe from I Was a Teenage Weredeer, Cassius Mass from Lucifer Star, G from Agent G, which is
the cyberpunk.
Yeah, that. Well, I would. It's not necessarily the best example of cyberpunk as much as it is a cyberpunk world there, because Agent G is a corporate assassin, so he's kind of exactly against the kind of a politics, at least at the start, that typically do my work there, because I thought it's kind of fun to imagine the guy in the really nice suit who would normally be the villain of these kind of stories.
Yeah.
The Total Recall henchman.
Which I thought, so just bouncing off that the first one's more like almost more techno thriller. Something I loved about it was that the first one felt like it's tomorrow, not 10 years or 20 years in the future.
Yes,
and
I had an idea there, and which was realized in the series. But in retrospect, I probably should have done all 3 books as just one big one there, so people knew where I was going. Because the premise of Agent G is that it starts in, they have advanced technology like cybernetic enhancements and so on. There's like 40 years or whatever, like near kind of future kind of deal there. And the government is using these cyborgs and corporate, private military contractors and secret conspiracies and corporations, blah blah blah. The usuals. Stuff there, and it is more techno thriller there because they're just going after terrorists, and there's not really a punk element there. But the technology proliferates over the course of the second book, and leaks happen, and disaster, and so on. And by the third book, society as we've known it has utterly changed and become the kind of cyberpunk dystopia we see in Deus Ex and Cyberpunk 2077. And poor G is left from going to being the deadly, well-paid assassin at the top of the world to trying to survive in the world the same as anyone else. It's like, how does our world become the dystopia we see in these kind of stories? As like,
I haven't encountered that elsewhere. There may be another example of sort of charting the decline, is it, or the rise? Depends on which way you want to look at it. But I'm not sure. I can't off the. I'm pretty well read in cyberpunk, and
quite often we end up in that world, right? We start in that world, and there's no real explanation of. There's a kind of
bit of backstory. Yeah, exactly.
Some sort.
Yeah, I like as said there. I think the closest thing we actually do is like the flashback scenes of Judge Dredd.
Yeah. So that was a really original. I found that really original, and I really liked the bridging of the gap. But you haven't released that as a
joke. If I may pause a second,
go on,
because it's a really funny joke. Which was the funny joke was where I was talking to a friend who thought cyberpunk was a dead genre, which it isn't there, but we don't call it cyberpunk anymore there. It's like, maybe people can point to the Matrix there, but just about every science fiction movie, has the outlaw hackers and the evil corporations and so on there. It's proliferated. That's not a separate genre anymore there, because here's what happened. Somewhere around from 90, let's go say 6 to 2010, our world became a cyberpunk dystopia and we didn't notice.
Yeah. Yes, look at us with our video screens, and I'm even in a sort of how many monitors have we got? And
describe Bitcoin and Anonymous and Enron, and you basically do have, and we do have things like Blackwires. Like these are all things that in the 80s people would have said is ridiculous.
Private corporations launching spaceships.
That's great. That inspired Agent G. This line from RoboCop, which was by the villain, where he says, and I'm going to paraphrase it, OCP invests in space exploration, medicine, and prisons, which 3 industries that are typically considered nonprofit. Good business is where you find it. And that joke is like, no one would get it now.
Yeah.
Except you should really be crying about it.
Yeah, it's these days it's not funny, but back then, like,
it's like, yes, someone watched RoboCop, Paul Verhoeven, and they decide, maybe we should make prisons for profit now. That can't backfire.
What worries me is didn't he also do
Showgirls?
Starship Troopers.
Troopers. Showgirls. Yeah. Both nightmare visions of something. You can tell everyone's priorities. Damien goes straight to Showgirls. Sorry. So, Go on.
Well, you talked. You know, you touched on Amazon a minute ago. Has that and your audiobook kind of reviews. So how do you think? What kind of influence are you getting from audiobooks? Do you think they're a good thing? I do a lot of my reading on audiobooks these days because I find I can do it while I'm traveling. I can do it while I'm doing housework, doing whatever else is going on.
Audiobooks are the only reason I'm able to be a quote unquote author rather than a part-time author, like, you know, vast majority of indie people's there. That's where the money was made there. But here's the thing, I also hit in a good time there. And if you can get successful in audiobooks there, you have to be successful in audiobooks to become successful. It's just the right time with the rules of supervillainy to like get that superhero edge, and there wasn't that much competition. But if you can afford to make an audiobook, which is a not inconsiderable expense, $2,000 or $3,000 usually, if you're then definitely it's something to do because it's a whole new audience for people that don't necessarily read the traditional books there, and there's a lot less competition. And if you get a good narrator for it there, it can bring a whole new perspective on it there. I definitely owe most of my success as a quote unquote international bestseller to being the audiobooks there.
Yeah. You've had some sorry, go on.
You mentioning narrators, you know, because I could be turned off from an audiobook really quickly with a not optimal narrator, shall we say? You know, and somebody who maybe I've read a lot of their stuff, and then I have new things out on audiobook, and it's just something about the narrator grates. So I guess picking. Do you have much say over your narrators, or is that a publishing
I
decision?
lucked out there. I got picked up by a man. Most of my books are by a man named Jeffrey Kafer, and I have some exceptions there. But Jeffrey Kafer is a great author. He has a very distinctive voice, and he did the BioShock Rapture book, among other things. Yeah. So we were clearly in the same video game, heavy, high concept politics kind of space there. He also does a bunch of space books too, so perfect for that there. But yeah, finding the right narrator is interesting because one thing I discovered once he had recorded a couple of dozen books of mine is he actually has his own fan club of people who buy his books for his narration rather than the authors.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So you've got
you can inherit that adds to your advertising there.
I'm trying to think. One of the other narrators you had for Fankton, so the vampire, straight out of Fankton.
Yeah, straight out of Fankton.
And those are 100 Miles and Vamping. Is that the second?
Yeah, they're all based on NWA's song titles.
Yeah, amazing.
I came with a very idea of not terribly original, but still surprising was like, hey, there's not many black vampires other than Blade, the Queen of the Damned, Aisha. It's like, so why not, how would a guy who, if I somehow could combine Clerks and Blade?
Yes. That's a very accurate. So you're the narrator you've got for that. I think it's Carrie Height. I may be mispronouncing.
Great guy. He did Miles Morales for a couple of Spider-Man books.
It was spot on for that particular character, and so bouncing off that into to Fankton. There's a bit in Fankton. I don't want to ruin it, but there's a bit in it where, shall we say, seeds are spelled that need to be counted, and that of course I know that's part of certain vampire lore and such, and it was the comedic time. I'm going to try and expand your head so it doesn't fit on the screen, Charles. That was perfect comedic timing and had me
yes,
in stitches for quite a long time.
I admit I was definitely inspired by Vampire the Masquerade for Straight Out of Fankton there, but from the perspective of how people actually play that game rather than actually how it's written, which is supposed to be so romantic, gothic, and tragic. Well, in fact, every game I do is like just these random dudes have gotten turned and are just not to be able to take them seriously whatsoever.
Completely dysfunctional psychopaths.
Yes, I have a lot of fun also with the concept that if you go back into actual vampire lore, they have a lot of ridiculous weaknesses, and with so many overpowered vampires who are like just sparkling in the sun. A cheap joke, I know, but it'd be nice. What if you gave a vampire every weakness, and they're really, really kind of individually terrible to beat? They get more powerful there, but in my world, they can be taken down by a Burger King patty.
Amazing.
It's like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Was that, apart from perhaps having some kind of traumatic throwback to Sesame Street, Was that is that something you researched
what I realized
or?
that, in fact, that the Count von Count is actually this
Vampire.
is on Sesame Street, and Sesame Seeds are one. Is like, was that deliberate or just a really weird coincidence?
Yeah, exactly. So that's you sent me down that rabbit hole with that scene. I was thinking,
I like to think it's
must be.
deliberate, right? It's a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so we actually are playing, funnily enough, in a Vampire the Masquerade game at the moment. We've got someone who's running it for us. We normally bat on this channel. We do sort of like live recorded plays and such, but it sounds very familiar.
It's a Planescape revival.
Oh, amazing. Is that do you mind if I ask a little bit about that, because I love Planescape?
Oh, by all means. Here's the thing. My primary players are my co-authors with Michael Suckus, who has written about maybe a quarter of my books.
Right.
Yeah, he's one of my gamers in that game there, so it works out well there.
That's awesome. How do you find co-authoring? Is that something that is an easy thing? You just gel and you both come up with similar ideas?
I've had good experiences with Michael, but we've been gaming for literally since 1999 together, roughly. So it was very easy to switch on to that point and use each other's ideas and comments and have a lot of respect there. And I thought, like, oh, that means that co-authoring is fine. Aside from the money not necessarily splitting down two ways as much as it should, there's no problem with it. Then I dealt with another author who, I'm not going to name names because this is I lift up and I push down there, but they were a nightmare. And I was like, okay, right, give my rough ideas. Like, it's like, well, I hate this, this point. I don't think we should be doing this, as like, starting to start over there. And then I realized they were never going to compromise on anything. And we actually got the book almost done. They quit.
Oh,
and the
okay.
Cover had already been bought.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yes. There are some people who just can't, compromise their artistic vision, and you just gotta watch this kind of thing. It's kind of like finding a publisher too. It's like I have, I'm great with Crossroad Press there, but I dealt with a publisher who the first one, went all far right and became Oliver North Publishers. Yeah. Second publisher didn't ever pay me, and they had sold my books to Audible and kept the money for themselves. It's not, to be fair, they had the defense like, oh, we were going to reinvest it in the other books, and then I'd just pay you back with their profits. None of those books sold.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's fraud, no matter how you slice it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And but you understand that the guy really doesn't know what he's doing there. And a third publisher, the idea was they made a very large number of tweaks in the books there. So I think, kind of hilariously, I sold about 200 or 300 copies of this one audiobook, and I got paid $7.
Wow.
Yes, I did not realize that all the expenses would be recomped.
Yeah.
Ouch. Yeah.
But
you got to. So I have this piece of advice for all future indie authors and writers: it's good to get published there, but you never go join someone without actually interrogating one or probably better even three authors of their experiences with it first.
Sort of do your due diligence and.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, never do paid promotions unless you have also got someone to endorse them there, because 99% of them are scams.
Yeah. Oh, so one of the ways in which you come to be on the channel being interviewed here is that I know you through the writing community, and you're someone who you're very, very active, and you're very, very much out there sort of providing advice and helping out other authors who are at different levels of, getting into their career. And at the same time, you produce a huge number of books, and you promote them. You do all of this stuff. Do you sleep? Are you actually a vampire, Charles? Now I've got you on camera, because I don't know where you find the time.
Subtle benefits there in the situation there. I had a family who were very supportive in my introduction at this point there. I am a house husband there, so I have a lot of time riding around house when I'm not, taking care of every fire that's about to be burning out.
Yeah.
But the real thing with being a writer is kind of influenced by being a soft anarchist. There is like, I believe very much that it's not a competition, and a rising tide will lift all boats.
Yeah.
Help each other and be helped in turn there. And that occasionally runs into like that author I mentioned who went, no, we're all competing against one another, and we should not be working to help each other at this point, because if you do that, you're helping your competition. I'm like, people read more than one book.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
A guy who likes one,
is
fans of one can be read fans of another.
yeah. I come from a performing arts kind of point of view. I'm an actor, and I'm just starting a masters and stuff. And yeah, but you get that. I think that's quite a common thing in the kind of the
Creative
like
world,
the performing arts, the
Yeah.
creative world. I don't know if it necessarily is in the fine art world.
I bet it is.
But yeah, you have people that are like, as you said, rising tide lifts all boats. Everybody working together. I'm very much into kind of grassroots, kind of theatre and drama, and bringing theatre to everybody. Not being an elitist kind of thing. But then I've met people that are just literally there to step on whoever they can to get themselves higher up, closer to whatever award it is they're looking for.
It's a bit of an ego issue there, isn't there?
Yeah,
and I think perhaps.
I think so.
I mean, obviously, as being a performer, being writers, putting things out, going on YouTube and putting there is a sort of ego attached to saying I'm worth listening to, I'm worth reading, I'm worth coming to see. But
yes, I do have met indie authors who really should keep their day job, and there's like they need much more practice before they're starting to throw their books out there and expecting themselves to be making a living on it there. But a lot of them, the big issue is there are many great, awesome, talented guys, and the problem is getting the books not out there, but people to know they exist who are fans.
Yeah.
After that, you should be reviewing, sharing, recommending, networking. It's a system that we all need to be helping each other, because otherwise you just will not have people even understand them. There's just too many books out there for anyone to sort through it.
Yeah.
And everyone needs to be informing their own fans, and their fans will grow. And
like that community aspect to it, like communal growing, communal. I don't want to sound even more lefty than you are, but so yeah, that communal aspect to growing the art form and growing the genre.
It's funny there, because yes, I'm first of all an American, and second of all, I live in Kentucky, which means that a raging anarchist from where I am is probably a hardcore Tory or what.
Well, no, I'm not quite. Yeah, but yes. Oh, I've managed to unplug something here. Sorry, my lights are going out. Give me 1 second.
So when you read other people's stuff, with a view to just enjoying it or recommending it, are there any things that particularly you love straight away, or anything that turns you off a book straight away? Is there any kind of pet hates or pet loves?
Well, I've mostly moved to indie books now at this point, because in my efforts to promote indie books and help my fellow authors who are not in the big six there, I have generally drifted off the larger publishers. So I have only a few series left of them there. So I'm always searching for things, by the authors I've met online there, but I've met wonderful indie communities as well who recommend me to these kind of things, just as I'm recommending them. And I do my best to do reviews. I'm on like 4 or 5 review sites, actually, as a guest contributor. And, giving a chance to a new author is always a bit of a crap shot. And like I said, I'm fair in my criticism there. I'm not going to give the bad review. I'm just going to tell it directly to the author's face. It's like,
right, yeah.
And sometimes it works, and sometimes they listen. I've actually had a couple that redid their books there and became much stronger for it and went on to be successes. And sometimes I find gems there. It's like Luke's books is very funny there, because I read him not knowing what I would be getting there, and I thought Mercury Sun was just a genuinely fantastic book there. It probably could have made it fully on the open public market there, but it was better because because it was an indie, because they didn't have to compromise the vision.
Thank you.
And you get that in the indie scene that you don't get in all these trend chasings.
That is interesting, isn't it? Because I think looking at the range of books that you've written, you don't seem to have been constrained with your creative vision. With going, obviously we're talking about a whole range of books here, but let's bring it back to the Cthulhu Armageddon series. The latest one, Tree of Azathoth, is a departure from the sort of, you mentioned earlier, sort of Mad Max in a Cthulhu-based apocalypse scenario. But
post-apocalypse Western, so to speak, Dark Tower, Stephen King.
Yeah, exactly that. But the Tree of Azathoth is moving into a more sort of like noir investigator type. Obviously, still within a similar setting, but
it's an interesting thing there. I can go ahead and spoil this a little bit there. The first two books are weird West kind of stories there.
Yeah.
But the Tree of Azathoth is Booth ends up, for a variety of reasons, wandered into the dreamlands of Lovecraft, which is, again, Lovecraft's pulpier, weirder side kind of things there. Because, you have the typical, like, nerdy investigator getting eaten by something in his other stories. Or, going to the mansion he inherits, and, oh, God, there's cannibals in the basement. But the Dream Quest books are Lovecraft making a pulp fiction writer who enters the Dreamlands, becomes this ultimate badass who tricks the gods and has these kind of high pulp John Carter-esque kind of adventures. And, John goes into the Dreamlands for various reasons there, and he finds himself in a fully living city after having lived most of his life in ruins and desert and wasteland. And he's trying to adjust because in this world he looks, due to a variety of circumstances, identical to a private detective. And dialing the occult mystery as the element was a very fun departure. And switching up the genres, I think, felt good, because I did the first two books there, and I wasn't sure how much there was left to say there, and that was why there wasn't a sequel for 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, but this, it works. Yeah. But I can imagine. I definitely think so. I've got about, I assume, about 3/4 of the way through it, and I'm going to. It's entertaining, very entertaining, and I don't want to ruin anything by going into details. But the simple fact is that if you hadn't been sort of able to control what you were doing and having the sort of creative freedom, maybe that would never have happened. And I can see how that would be a bit of a loss. You'd lose out this originality, which I think marks your work.
I threw a very wide net there because I had the idea, and it didn't quite work out, but did not work out. Yeah. That I would write in a variety of genres, and my fans in those genres would check out my other books.
Yeah,
because they'd be trying to appeal to different groups there and seeing that, and instead of one strongly. I probably could have just written the supervillainy books and been like on book 20 by now, and it would have been fine. But I'm very glad I did what I did, because it definitely has created a much wider, more varied reader experience.
Yeah.
And are there any genres that you wouldn't feel comfortable writing in or wouldn't want to touch? Is there a rom-com coming at some point?
Well, Psycho Killers in Love. Come on, that's a rom-com.
Here's the thing there. My wife actually tried to do me that's like, no, I can't do it there. I tried writing the sex scenes, and no.
70 Shades of Lavender. Not for you.
No. It's interesting enough there. I was strongly encouraged to get into lit RPG there, and when I tried to research, I was like, no, I don't. I love all of this stuff, and it's all together like a shit sandwich.
Yeah.
I've read like 40 books there. It's like 3 were good. People kept recommending them. Because too many people are trying too hard for this, so to speak. There.
Depends. I don't know how many people know lit RPGs. Kind of, sort of. I don't know how popular it is these days. Maybe it's very popular. I've seen.
I mean, it was very popular. Then it capped off, and unfortunately, it's kind of sinking fast. The rough idea is they're basically books where people follow RPG rules in their life theoretically, and that should be the genre. But it's gradually it got infested with, I'm not going to say incels, but people who are very much writing softcore guy porn.
Yeah.
And the characters are rather one-dimensionally wish-ish fulfillment there. Just And because it was a genre completely contained on Amazon's Kindle Unlimited list, people turned it out very, very much to a very specific formula, and didn't work out very well.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to shit on the genre, but I'm kind of, yes, I am.
Well, I suppose it's like, there's,
and
as
I
you said,
so
3 or 4 good examples.
I write a bunch of wish fulfillment with nerds making it good there.
Yeah. But
I just think I do so much better.
Yeah. Well, I think you do. I mean, I haven't read every RPG thing, but the fact is, there's obviously diminishing returns in certain genres, and they can become very derivative. And I mean, am I right in thinking? So I may have completely misunderstood this. You obviously have been a blogger for years, and there's a website called tvtropes.com, I think.
Yes.
I don't know whether you were ever. I don't know whether you were a contributor.
I'm not involved in that there, but I spent a lot of time there because I love creating. tvtropes.com is basically a wiki, except it has the idea of breaking down all the various stories from things like everything from Stephen King to Game of Thrones and so on there, and you put your page up there and it lists. Does this story contain the chosen one? Does it contain black and white morality? Does it contain gray morality? And it's a fun little game there, just like cutting all these things out there and saying like this has this and this and this, and you can actually do it pretty well for being able to use it as a kind of journal. It's like, I check out this, will I find the things I like about it, and it'll give you a rough rather than just. And I've done hundreds of pages for that thing, breaking down my story there, and it's funny there because I actually got brought there because people did that for some of my books.
Right.
So I have a rather more than my fan base warrants. All of my books have been listed there. It's kind of funny. And I do it for friends too. So many books.
I mean, one of the things I would have said is a lot of what I think you do with books is look at tropes. So, for example, looking at Wraith Knight, and you've got the trope you could have of the Dark Lords defeated, but you're then turning the trope on its head by being, examining.
That's the thing. There, it's like
subverting.
Tropes are basically the ingredients in the cookie.
Yeah.
And I think here's the thing: having your characters aware of the ingredients. If you're a gamer, especially, you have probably had a more intimate relationship with these kind of things than people in academia, which I also was a teacher about these kind of things there with literature degree, and which that and some toilet paper would help me out in the apocalypse. Going off that, everyone knows what the formulas are if you played Baldur's Gate for the fantasy story. Probably more so because as a gamer, you have played through it, you have been there on the ground level. I think that gives gamers a view unique to understanding storytelling in some ways that other people wouldn't.
Yeah, like a personal involvement. More this has happened to me rather than I've read it and it's happening to somebody else.
I mean, everyone is familiar with little Mr. Potter, this kind of thing there, or the Chosen One or Arthur or so on there. But when you are actually the one doing it there, you are fully immersed more in understanding the Dark Lord and these kind of things there, and you probably played several variations of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like being with that, coming into writing genre fiction as a long time, ever since I was 12 gamer, you are wanting to take a twist on it and see how that runs.
Yeah.
So, and perhaps it's just me there. All of my characters are guys who could be consumed as bad guys. And I just love the anti-heroes. But I also love, perspective being what it is. Are they the bad guys, or is it just what society is saying, or the people involved? And playing with that as well. Gary is probably a very good superhero because the majority of the about 10,000 people he's killed in the books are members of Hydra or Nazis kind of thing. They're supervillains themselves there. But, being as he is in a quote-unquote superhero universe, everyone thinks he's a crazy terrorist.
Yeah.
Because that's how the rules of a superhero world work. You're either lawful good or you're nothing.
It's right.
And,
absolutely.
Wraith Knight, it takes place. I've never played in Wraith Knight's world there, but you could definitely play a Dungeons and Dragons campaign by that there. And, it's very practical, sort of, fireball flinging magic kind of thing there. And it's like, because I love that. It's like, okay, yeah, he has a dragon mount, 20th level versus a wizardry, kind of this like kind of guy who beats armor. But what do you do with that kind of character? Isn't that like going to totally steamroll everything else? No, you just build bigger guys with that also have it.
Yes.
Here he fights Conan. Yeah, that's where Tiamat shows up. Oh, I'm sorry, Tiamat's copyrighted. 5-headed dragon abomination.
Yes. Maybe add a 6th head just to avoid any possible.
I didn't have this dragon actually. It's called the Great Abomination. I'm not even joking. I threw that in as I was running short on the size of that book in the first one. There, it's like, okay, I'm gonna have given these kind of characters incredible things. How do I scare them some more? It's like, okay, some asshole combines 7 dragons into one. It shows up, random encounter. Roll for initiative.
Yeah. So like that gaming influence again. Shit, the characters have completed all the missions and done everything. They've beaten everybody, and we've still got half an hour of the game session left. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
Right, huge dragon, 7 heads.
Oh,
it's a bit like a chant. So because bouncing back to Tree of Azathoth, you referenced Raymond Chandler's maxim about man with a gun coming in. When you don't know what's happening.
Whenever the story is lagging, have a man with a gun.
And if it's a 7-headed dragon, that's also fine.
Yes, it's actually it's hilariously it was inspired by The Big Sleep there, which Raymond is famously a story there where Raymond Chandler actually doesn't know who killed one of the characters. He wrote. But he needed the story to kick off there, so he says like, okay, this guy's found murdered, and then he says like, okay, this scene is boring. I'm explaining everything. A guy with a gun shows up and just shoots him, this other guy. So the story's not over now. And then finally finishes the story. It's published, and everyone there is. And one guy writes in his letters like, "Who killed the chauffeur?" And he's like, "Shit, I never solved that." And I wrote she was somewhere else. The only person who could have done it.
Yeah, yes, that's the classic painting yourself into a corner. But hey, it worked. So
they didn't notice, though. Clearly, they think they're not smart enough to get it. And it's like, up with that.
It's like when someone asked what one of the directors of it's not directors of photography. Damien, you're going to have to help me with this. In films, in Star Wars, where you see Darth Vader shoot at Luke, he's got a target lock on Luke, and then Han Solo comes in and. Somehow the shot that Vader fires doesn't just nail that X-wing. And the question is, well, hang on, but he's got him locked and he fires. What happens to that shot? And I think the response was, "Get a life," or something like that.
That was another thing, actually. I think there's another famous Orson Welles plot hole story, actually, which was Citizen Kane. It's like, wait, so Citizen Kane's last words were Rosebud. And you picked him in this huge giant room that's like the size of a house, and and he said he died alone. So, how do anyone know what his last words were?
Anyone know what his last words were? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Orson Welles famously said, "Shut up."
Yeah.
Don't ever tell anyone that.
Exactly. Sometimes there are going to be poetic license. There's going to be plot holes somewhere, or something doesn't work.
I love it when my fans come up with me with theories about how things work. They've studied these books even more so than I've learned there, and several times I just like nod my head and say like, "Oh wow, you picked that up, huh?"
I mean, you did this with me because, I don't know whether this is right or not, but I said to you, "Isn't Wraith Knight set in the same universe as Lucifer's Star Charles?" And you will. I think you will.
I'm not saying that necessarily. I have combined a couple of my universes that weren't initially combined there. I'm not saying Wraith Knight was one of them there, but I have done that there when I was like, okay, clearly this is set in roughly the same genre. I'm combining all the other things, so why not do it?
Amazing.
And Wraith Knight takes place, I think, roughly 25,000 maybe to 30,000 years in the future from Lucifer Star. Lucifer Star takes place 1,000 years ahead of a book called Space Academy Dropouts, and that takes that place 400 years before my Agent G books, which are in cyberpunk. So literally, if you actually are a fan of all my sci-fi apparently takes place in one universe, even though apparently that in my fantasy series. Because magic, technology once advanced can do anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, cyberpunk world turns into Star Trek at some point.
Star Trek then turns into Star Wars, and then Star Wars then turns into Lord of the Rings. But it makes perfect sense, actually. And I think it's brilliant. So maybe a quick
Yeah,
quick
the
fire.
original Dungeons and Dragons had a couple of modules where, like, okay, a UFO lands in the barrier peaks, and you have to fight robots.
Yes, and I don't know if you ever played the Ultima games. Ultima 7 Part 1 has a bit where a Kilrathi fighter, space fighter, lands in a field, and they're all
That's perfect.
old school gaming. Sorry, I thought we might do a little quick fire round.
By all means.
So, difficult questions: physical book or Kindle or audio book. You've got to choose one to be with you on a desert island. What's it going to be?
Well, that's the thing there. If I'm on a desert island, I need to charge my Kindle, so obviously you should go with a physical one there. But I love Kindle way more than I love either audiobooks or regular books there. My wife also gives me shit over that because she's the one who bought me my Kindle. I was like, no, I love regular books. I don't know why you would get me this thing there. And then she's like, a month later, and I've like downloaded 200 books.
Star Wars, Star Trek.
Oh,
that's one for the rest of
I'm that little girl meme of like, why not both? Because I grew up on TNG when I was 8 years old there, but I was also watching Star Wars the entire time there. I'm indoctrinated fully. Space Academy is very much an homage to every Star Trek trope ever there. That's like Gary does superheroes. The character of Vance Turbo, hero of space.
Yeah,
is very much Captain Kirk, Chris Pine sort of era there. I think Keanu Reeves plays him though in my head.
Okay, that's interesting. So do you have?
That's the idealistic, utopian future there. Lucifer Star is very much Star Wars, but incredibly gritty, wound down, and cynical, and full of fascist versus a flawed democracy kind of storyline. And if I had, so I'm going to say, so in Star Wars versus Star Trek, clearly the answer would be, since I love both, Babylon 5.
Actually, there is. I know Damien's got a question he wants to ask, but because I've read the Space Academy ones, I had a hint towards the later part of that series that perhaps you were moving towards a Babylon 5 type vibe with old, like, pre-races coming back, and they're coming back, and we were going to get a Vorlon Shadow type hint. But perhaps I shouldn't ask secrets to be revealed.
I would even go so far as to, I would say Mass Effect, but I think Mass Effect was ripping off Babylon 5.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's actually more like, my Cthulhu influence is leaking through there. It's like, strangely, once I finished the Cthulhu Armageddon book, finished it with my second book. Originally supposed to be a standalone, then I wrote another one. But, once I start alien advanced horrors of incredible age start showing up in my book, it's like, but I need to write another Cthulhu Armageddon book. The ideas are starting to bleed through.
Damien, I'm sorry I cut across your question, mate.
No, that's cool. You were talking about, like, Keanu Reeves plays him in your head. Do you have, like... So, do you know an author, you probably know Robert Rankin, right? The Armageddon series. And there's a running joke throughout that the main character looks like a certain actor. Looks like Harrison Ford is the joke. And it's like, everyone's like, aren't you? And he's like, no, I'm not. So is that thing that goes through your head as you're writing that this person...
I do a little fantasy casting there. It's not 100% perfect there, I mean, it's kind of hard to cast Jacob Rivers' son because he doesn't have a face most of the time.
Winona Ryder is... Jane.
He can assume a human form when he needs to, but he's got most of the time he's just like the cloaked dark booger there. But yeah, I have some characters that are very strongly in my head, specific actors, while other characters just are in my head, but they're no particular person. John from Cthulhu Armageddon I knew who was playing him the moment I saw the still for the Dark Tower with Idris Elba.
Yes.
Yeah.
Funnily enough,
I was just like, you need some guy who can play Roland, who can convince you he's the most badass man who's ever lived. Yeah. And Idris is like a vanishing number of actors that could do that. And so I feel the same with John there, even though the movie was shit.
He's got a lot of stage. He's got a lot of screen presence. Yeah. And
I am so terribly upset they didn't do a faithful adaptation of the Dark Tower series for that. That would have been awesome. 5 movies.
Yeah.
Waste of him, frankly.
Yeah.
But yeah,
absolute waste of the source material as well, in my opinion.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
And also, you would think Hollywood would have gotten better there because they had already had all these successful series completely adapted, and Stephen King. So hey, why did you feel the need to improve it and soften the edges? But going on that, yeah. So he's Idris Elba. For the character of Lucifer Star. Yeah, I oddly enough did imagine him kind of being like a Harrison Ford looking kind of guy there.
Right.
Like long blonde hair, kind of wig, I probably would have to be wearing theirs, but otherwise you're good there. Because he is a kind of Han Solo character, just it comes from a very different sort of place there, because he grew up in a very posh environment, even though it was on the back of the peasants.
Right.
And these kind of things are a very fun little game, and sometimes they work very well, and sometimes they don't. Gary, I know Gary's face perfectly, and Cindy, who is his Harley Quinn-esque girlfriend, and so on there. But no, they're no one in particular, because they're in my mind already completely there.
Am I right in thinking Jane from Teenage Werdeer? That's a sort of a win. I get a Winona Ryder vibe, but am I wrong about that?
I think yes, very much. That's a funny thing there, because I had the character, with the little. She's the pale, dark, snarky kind of. All of my characters, I basically will say, like, very much feel like they belong in the '80s, even when they're in the modern day. So it's kind of funny there, because I made the character, and she's very much fun. People kept comparing to Winona Ryder, and I was like, I pull up a picture of her with the short hair. I was like, oh my god, that's identical. And she does very much have the kind of attitude for a Winona-ish character, so go for that.
Kind of Beetlejuice Winona Ryder, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say Heather's there, but that movie didn't age very well.
Christian Slater as well, isn't it? That's
yeah.
It's pretty great.
Well,
yeah.
It's about guys plotting to murder students in their school there. Not as funny in America.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. My 13-year-old kid
let's move
loves
quickly past that little point there, galloping.
A hard edit on that bit. So another one of these short questions towards it, because you've been talking to us for a while. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm gonna have to.
We'll have to tell the audience about how utterly ridiculously long we had to delay to get this started.
I didn't even think you were real for the first half an hour.
Yeah, well, it was Charles with ChatGPT or whatever.
Yeah. My camera was broken, audience, and it turned out I just had it turned off for about an hour of trying to find fixes online.
Oh, there's an on button.
We tried Zoom, we tried Discord, we tried Facebook messaging. I've got like one of those privacy buttons you can swipe across on my camera here, and
I think I did that because I was afraid the NSA was watching me. No, I'm not that kind of anarchist. No, I'm not the crazy kind.
No cookbooks. So, final difficult question, I think. Got to choose one: Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones.
I actually have a very solid Game of Thrones answer kind of there. I prefer the anti-heroes, the dark moral ambiguity, and I also do love Tolkien just fine there. But so I will instead take a third option and say, even though it is against everything I just said, Dragonlance.
Okay.
Classic. Yeah,
that was when I started my thing there. Raceland Majory is probably way more characters, and since I ripped off him for Gary, and except if Raceland actually could, not be such an enormous asshole, and Lord Soth, I gotta give props to Hickman and Weiss.
Yeah,
they're two great characters to take influence from. Absolutely.
So perhaps let's say Dungeons and Dragons in general rather than.
Are you looking forward to the new film? Because we've had 2 Dungeons and Dragons films before, which were.
We have 3. I have seen Book of Vile Darkness, which is only in Eastern Europe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why it is not available on DVD.
Okay, I didn't even know that existed. Okay, I've just lost my geek credentials.
The answer to that is I have tickets for an early screening that I bought online, and I never have, and I don't go to the theater ever again. Well before COVID, so
right.
Yeah, I'm going to see it.
Awesome.
I've seen some screen grabs there in the background. There's the characters from the cartoon series.
Oh, yeah, I was going to mention that if you did. There it was like, oh yeah. They have a lot of Dungeons and Dragons jokes, and they're going hard on the humor. And I know I see people complaining about the Lord Dungeons and Dragons should be a serious epic fantasy movie, and I'm like, that's not Dungeons and Dragons.
How many games have you played?
Yeah.
It's like if you want to do The Legend of Drizzt or Dragonlance Chronicles, there are Dungeons and Dragons books that are serious. But Dungeons and Dragons as a whole is not serious.
Yes,
I mean,
get a bunch of. Sorry, go on.
We spent most of the session working out how much air fits inside of Learmon's tiny hut a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
You know?
My Planescape game, I think the 3 adventures we've played so far is one is the characters deal with a bunch of cyborgs trying to kidnap children to keep their artificial robot god going. The second game had them stealing a unicorn for a guy's birthday party. And the third one has they've been hired to get to force an old lady out of her house because her house is on a portal to the abyss. Then they find out she was 80 years ago a really hot, sexy, evil cultist.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant.
I suppose.
So, yeah,
Go on. Sorry.
No, I'm saying my world is very much like Critical Role, and I think that's most of our experiences. Like that Vox Machina show there. I complain about it's like the second season is way more serious. No, get back to the dick and fart jokes.
And that's what a session. So the film, and I don't know whether it's going to be the way it is. What I've seen is a cut where they resurrect someone. They raise dead to speak with dead to get the answers from them and do what the party would always do. You're like, no, does anyone want any snacks? No, don't ask that. That's a question.
The big difference between this and a D&D session is if they go full comedy would be yes. The only thing lacking is the Monty Python references.
Yeah. Or a main character dying and then a new character being introduced played by exactly the same actor.
Oh, yes.
Well, that may well happen for as far as we know.
Oh, yes. It's like, okay, I throw myself off the cliff and cast Featherfall. It's like, you hit the ground before you finish the casting time.
Yeah. That's absolutely. Fizbin style. You just turn into a whole room full of chicken feathers. Charles, thank you ever so much.
Listen, I'm playing my character. That's why I had to gut that family.
That's the edgy. I don't want to agree with everything the rest of the party says because I'm an edgelord character. Sorry. Charles, thank you ever so much for joining us and for being the first victim of our interview series. I hope you'll come again and talk to us about more detail about your books.
Yes, invite me when they discuss your books. There, I'd love to just tear into that Cold Sleep book that is coming out April.
It's very kind of you.
That reminds me, I forgot to get away my gratuitous advertising.
You should get in as much as you like.
Yeah, Cthulhu Armageddon 3, The Tree of Azathoth, and Wraith Knight 3, Wraith King are coming out next month.
Fantastic. We're going to put some links up and such, and hopefully throughout this interview, I've managed to do the technical wizardry that will be showing some of the covers and the series of your books, so people will have a clue, and we'll be throwing up links to Charles's books, and I think you've got a website. Would you like your website up as well and such? And we'll put that in the YouTube video links and things.
Yeah. Don't work too hard there. You'll end up like it. I can put my fan club, my Patreon,
You send me the links. I'll put them in the YouTube.
Absolutely, why not? Thank you so much for your very valuable time, and particularly all the faffing about that went around before, where I said, "Hey, Charles, come and do this interview. It's on Discord. It'll be easy," and then set you up for a bit of a technical headache.
No. The way that ended there is entirely on my end. There, I should have gone with my original idea of just putting a piece of tape on it. That at least would have been easy to solve.
Charles, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Pleasure to meet you. Thank you very, very much. Quick word to our subscribers, our audience out there. If you're not a subscriber yet, then and you're watching our content, then please do click that subscribe and like button. We're a small channel trying to grow. Thanks to people like Charles coming on and helping us to grow our reach. Please do like, subscribe, comment on the videos, tell us what you like about what we do and what you don't like, and what you'd like to see more of.
Absolutely.
We're really trying to make a go of this, so your support is, as always, massively appreciated.
2 thumbs up for that. And also, please, the links that we're going to be posting, you trust me, I'm as a big fan. I don't think I've read all of your books yet, Charles, but I'm getting there. I've read about probably 10, 12, 13, 14. But they're brilliant. And whether you're looking for something that's light-hearted, or you're looking for something that's got a lot of grit and or a combination of the two, there's snark, there's depth. you've got a lot of quality storytelling there, and I can't recommend them enough. And absolutely, you will be entertained. So, Charles, thanks again. Thank you, dear
Thank you very much.
viewers, and
Thank you very much.
we'll see you next time.
We'll see you again.